Okay, hello everybody. Today's Monday, June 9th, 2025. It's Luther Wilson III here. As a lot of you know, real estate pro here in the Kansas City market. A lot of my videos are tailored around investment properties, and I like to talk about capital, strategy, and operations when it comes to assisting investors, working with investors, maybe loaning them money, or you yourself with a team or partners investing. And so in today's session, I want to dig more into a framework or a model that I believe is working very well for real estate investors in today's market. As a lot of y'all know, if you've been tuned in, we're in second quarter 2025 already, and the game has changed, okay? So there's a lot of different factors and circumstances that have changed for everyday people and entrepreneurs and people interested in real estate over the last several years, actually the last like 2 to 5 years especially. And so, my background has been all in real estate operations, from the sales and the leasing onto the management, and then of course, using other people's money to invest in real estate to grow a portfolio, as well as to do short-term transactions. And I've been able to help a number of investors over the last 14 years to do that. And so a little bit about my background, kind of what I mentioned before, doing the various aspects of the business. I thought about it the other day. I've started 16 companies in real estate over the last 14 years. 2 of those were real estate brokerages. 3 of those were property management firms. 1 of those entities was a private lending company. And then the rest were either investment firms or what people might refer to as private equity firms. And of those 16, there's 5 that are still rolling. Then there's a 6th one that I may end up not doing anything with anymore. But over those years, it's allowed me to dig deep into the various aspects of real estate investing. And I've learned a lot of valuable lessons along the way. And some of those I have shared on social media. You can check out some previous videos that I've done where I talk about, again, capital, strategy, and operations. And this video today is definitely going to be helpful for those investors and those real estate practitioners who are serving investors to get you to see another way to invest, so that maybe not every single time, but you could start to free yourself up when you are placing capital and buying property and fixing it up and reselling it and dealing with the property management and so forth, so that, again, maybe not every single time, at least maybe not in the beginning, at some point, you could get to the point where you're able to invest in a manner that is less risky, so you don't necessarily feel like you are constantly under the gun, dealing with, short-term debt and heavy renovation projects and inner city or C-class properties that are in tougher locations. And then the stresses and the headaches and the nightmares that can come from traditional property management, maintenance, working with contractors and so forth. So again, a framework, hopefully, and a model that serious capital investors with a little bit deeper pockets can be able to place capital in a manner and invest in real estate in a manner, hopefully, that is more efficient and can generate, hopefully, higher returns, and at the same time not be as risky in, putting, yourself or your company at risk to lose money, okay? Because, if you've seen some of my stuff, I talk about it so much. There's a lot of misunderstandings and misconceptions about investing in real estate. And with my background, I feel, like my perspective is somewhat unique, and I feel very fortunate to have had the opportunity to work with several investors. Again, the sales, acquisitions, finding deals, managing rentals, overseeing renovation projects, helping other people get to it before I started to look at capital and how I could use other people's money to grow my own portfolio. Okay, so we're in Kansas City, and this framework really is a case for single family home investments, okay, with the use of seller financing as an exit strategy, okay? So I do believe that right now, especially in today's market, with interest rates being quite a bit higher than they were a few years ago, okay, we're still feeling the effects of inflation, and it seems like the dollar does not go as far in America anymore. And with the debt situations, that the debt crisis pretty much that America is in, having a framework, this is key. So in and around Kansas City. And again, like, could just be something that you do one or two or a few times, and you can add it to your arsenal, okay? So again, I favor single family home investments. And one of the main reasons is because we can offer seller financing to an individual, to a couple, to a family, and the benefits, the cash flow, the opportunity, the time freedom that we have from those investments, okay, is just amazing. And so how might that look in today's market in and around Kansas City, all right? And again, like, I've managed multifamily properties in the past. I've sold multifamily properties. I've sold a bunch of single family. And so I've been able to kind of see what it really is like to manage the operations either way that you go. So again, there's pros and cons to either way you go. And I really want to encourage investors to look outside the box, to get a little creative. And while you're doing your long-term rentals or short-term rentals, or perhaps you're doing multifamily or commercial, all of that can be very good. And again, you got to kind of look at, all right, because one of the biggest lessons that I've learned over the years, being a real estate practitioner and an investor, is, okay, we're definitely going to need capital. Every client that I've been able to successfully help through a transaction, they had one of two things when I started working with them, okay? They either had capital to invest from what they did on their job or their business, or maybe they sold another property, or they borrowed it or used it, someone else's money, right? They had capital to place. They either had the capital to place or they had a property. Those are the two, that's what it really came down to. Of all the clients that I've helped over the last 14 years, they either had capital or they had a property. And then I was able to put an agreement together with them, and then we can execute more seamlessly, okay? So as investors, there's a lot of different trainings out there where, you think you don't need any money, which is false. It's a misconception, okay? And so besides, the capital or having the property or me being able to help the actual client through the process, the other huge misconception that I see is the reality of management, the property management, okay, the operations, working with contractors or maintenance people to not only get through a purchase, okay, get through a renovation, and then when you have the rentals, what is that really like? That's the number one place where I get complaints is from investors who are struggling with operations. And when I think of operations, I think of working with contractors, okay, doing renovations, or doing property management of some sort. And again, a single family home, offering seller financing to a family or a couple or individual, we can structure it so that the operations is a lot cleaner, and at the end of the day, or 3 years, 5 years, 10 years, In a lot of cases, it could be quite a bit more profitable, okay? And the ease of management, right? There's a lot of practitioners, a lot of operators and investors who I've met over the years, and I myself, I love the idea of multifamily and commercial investments. However, it's going to require even more capital, and the operations are going to be even more challenging because you have either more doors like on multifamily, or you have higher expenses that you have to take care of, okay? And the operations, again, once you're in it and you own the thing, then the truth comes out, okay? Managing a multifamily project or a multifamily property is not what people think it is, okay? So the case for single family home investments, right? Using seller financing as an exit strategy, not just an entry, okay? If you can use seller financing as an entry to be able to acquire the property and then go from there, by all means, do that as much as you can. However, where we've been able to see the biggest impact and make the biggest impact and be able to do creative transactions more consistently and a higher volume of them is by offering home ownership and doing seller financing as an exit strategy. And again, you can refer back to some of my previous videos where I talk about some things to be concerned about with seller financing and the different types of seller finance transactions that you can do as an exit strategy. Okay, so what might that look like? Okay, so again, we're in Kansas City, right? Single family home, B-class areas, and I favor, a ranch built after 1950, maybe a split entry type of home, and we can find those all day long in and around Kansas City, and again, in B-class areas, around $200,000, okay? So you can use these numbers and change them and switch them up to whatever works for your market or where you're looking to invest. So if I meet an investor today, okay, and I talk to investors every single week about this same thing, and I can try to get them up to speed, but it's gonna be hard for me to do that because, I've looked at thousands of properties, I've helped over 100 investors, and so it's especially how things have tightened up the last few years, it's forced me to be more selective with who I take on as a client and who I try to assist through this process, because at the end of the day, I can't help everybody. And so some of y'all might see this video and say, all right, I'm not quite there yet, Luther, but in the future, once I have either raised enough capital from outside individuals, or if I happen to have, a resale of a business or a property, or I happen to save enough money, then I can go use this model or this framework, okay? So again, Kansas City, B-class single family homes. $200,000 home, that's the sweet spot. Some higher, some lower. We're gonna go in and we're gonna buy the house that's ready to go. Or if it's not completely move-in ready, it needs very little in the way of upgrades or repairs. And we're gonna use a 30-year fixed rate, non-qualified mortgage, okay? And we're gonna put 20 to 30% down. So right there, we've already lost 80 to 90+% of investors, because 80 to 90+% of investors are gonna go in using cash, or perhaps it could be a private money loan, or it could be a hard money loan. And it's because we haven't been trained or had enough reps to be able to learn how to raise capital properly, essentially. Because there's plenty of short-term lenders who will loan money to you for an investment, purchase, and part of the renovation to be able to give you an opportunity, okay? And this isn't a knock at the lenders, because I've used them before, okay? And because of the experience I've had, I've realized, like, all right, there's a way to be able to do this more efficiently, okay? So without having to use short-term debt, without having to take on a renovation project or a large construction project, okay? Without having to then go through a refi okay? And then from there, if you can even get through that process, because a lot of investors don't even get that far, okay? Then you can rent the property, or you could sell the property via seller financing, as I mentioned, okay? So the BRRRR strategy, right? That a lot of us have learned if you've researched investing or gone to a meetup or a conference or whatever. The BRRRR strategy, okay? You could do that, right? And add a little twist by doing seller financing, which is what we've done. And again, it put us under a lot of pressure. And in fact, we didn't really do it successfully because we still had to source additional capital to finish the renovation. And then even in some cases, we had to use additional capital, outside capital, that we had to scramble around and borrow to get through the rehab. And then we had to bring money to the table to get the refinance done. And then from there, we were able to do seller financing. Well, what I'm proposing here is to skip all of that and go the turnkey route if you can. And a key part of that, it goes back to what I mentioned earlier, being able to raise capital or have capital to be able to invest. That's huge, because at the end of the day, you're gonna, in a lot of cases, you're gonna have to source additional capital, whether it's from you or someone else, when you're doing fix and flip or when you're doing the BRRRR strategy, okay? So eventually, hopefully it gets to the point where you can raise the capital or save or make the capital. And in Kansas City, again, B-class areas, if I talk to I spoke with 2 investors last week. We met over beers. We had a few beers and we were talking about some of the dealings that they've purchased 4 properties so far, and they used hard money loans, and they struggled through the renovations. Okay, they sold one of them and they're still working through the other 3, and the lender is making more money than they are, okay? And they still have to figure out like how to get through the operations and so forth. So I'm just encouraging y'all to think a little bit further ahead. If you can get yourself to think outside of the box and learn how to raise capital that can be deployed and placed, that doesn't necessarily have to be paid back in 6 to 12 months, or let alone 2 to 5 years, then you can free yourself up to invest in a manner that is lower risk, it's more safe and secure. And with the seller financing, the time freedom, the returns, okay, the cash flow, and then also the opportunity that you can create more home ownership opportunities in your community, okay? So I sat down with these 2 guys last week. We met over beers. They asked what I'm up to, what I'm looking to do, and I laid it out. I said, look, if I'm gonna work with an investor, and I'm not opposed to doing the BRRRR strategy, I'll do that all day long, except I'm gonna have to do it with an investor who I know has additional capital, because we're gonna need it to get through the project. And I'm gonna help them, you know, if they haven't already found the deal, I could help them find a deal. I'm gonna get paid up front for that. And then I'm gonna get paid to oversee the renovation project, okay? And then at that point, we're gonna need to refi and then place the residents or the tenants, however that looks, on the back end. And that process can be daunting. So I told these guys, I said, look, here's what I'm looking to do. And they asked how much I want, how much capital I would be looking to get, and I gave them an 8-figure amount, okay? But I said, look, in and around Kansas City, B-class single family home, it's move-in ready. I'm going in, I'm gonna put 20 to 30% down on a $200,000 home, okay? That's $50,000, okay? The place is move-in ready, and then from there, we're gonna go right into some type of seller financing, whether it's a lease option or perhaps a contract for deed, or some of y'all may wanna do a true seller carryback or a wrap of some sorts. And I said, that's really it. That's basically it. And I'm gonna give the residents ample time, either by giving them a fully amortized, you know, contract for deed or note that they could pay off over time without a balloon, or I'm gonna do a lease option and I give them 10 years so they have ample opportunity to get their financing in order or, you know, they can resell the property, they can get new financing on it, that sort of thing. And I'll tell you what, me and a partner made it full cycle on one of those just a couple weeks ago. And we didn't know much better, so we ended up using the BRRRR strategy. And then we did seller financing. Okay, we made it full cycle to where our residents 2 weeks ago sold the property, paid us off, and we walked away with a large 5-figure check, okay? And so that's an example. I've helped multiple investors go the route where you skip the heavy renovation and you skip the short-term debt and you can skip the refi. I've helped multiple investors do that, and some of them had cash and some of them, you know, used leverage. They got a 30-year fixed rate mortgage from the jump, and then we did seller financing from there. So that's it. That's part of the sauce. That's a framework. It's a model. And of course, I got to give kudos to two of my favorite mentors. One is who is my dad, and he's been doing seller financing transactions now for, I think, 35 years. So that's something that I learned as I was growing up in the business and so forth. And then I got to give shout out to John Burley, who I met just a few years ago, his model, check him out. Again, don't take my word for it. Do some research, do your own homework, and you can definitely reach out if you want to know more about how we're making it happen here in the Kansas City market. But check out those guys. And the Burley model, you know, they're doing a similar thing there in the Arizona market. And him and his associates and his students have done thousands of these over the last, I think, 40 plus years. And so that's it for those savvy investors who have capital to invest and they don't want to play around with high interest rate, short-term debt and heavy renovation projects and working with contractors through that process and the operations, the tenants and the toilets and the struggle that comes from managing rentals in general. Here's an opportunity, here's a model, here's a framework that you can use today, right? And again, you can add it to the arsenal if you'd like, okay? You could still do the BRRRR strategy, your fix it, flip, or multifamily or commercial. But I'd encourage you to look at this type of way to invest for those who truly want a more safe and secure way to invest or place capital that produces cash flow as if you were a mortgage company or a private lending company. However, you're getting a lot more bang for your buck if done effectively and efficiently, then this is a great way to do it. All right, so for those that made it this far, appreciate you tuning in. If you've liked what you've heard and seen, go ahead and click the like button, subscribe. Check out my past videos where I talk about capital strategy and operations. And for those serious capital investors and those who want to learn more and get more experience in the Kansas City market, you know how to reach me. All right, have a great day. Peace, y'all.